Chapter 489. Immortal looked down at the huge circular waterfall in the vast sea from the sky. He suddenly had a feeling. He said in his mind, "System, sign in." The system replied instantly as usual, frowny face, sign in successful. Sign in location, Sea Heart Waterfall. Sign in reward, 1 dragon pool. Immortal was slightly puzzled. Dragon pool? What the hell? He looked at it in his mind. A small item appeared in the storage compartment of the system backpack. Looking carefully, he could see that this small thing looked the same as the huge circular waterfall in front of him. And what was strange was that there was water flowing down from this circular waterfall. At the bottom of the circular waterfall was a deep pool. The bottom of the pool couldn't be seen. There seemed to be black shadows swimming inside. He looked at the item description carefully. Frowny face dragon pool can be used to raise creatures above the grand desolate master level. These creatures can evolve into dragons after a certain period of time in the dragon pool. Different species can evolve into different dragons. Seeing this, Immortal felt like cursing Brother Knife. He had spent so much time, so much energy, suffered so much to evolve into a dragon. But now, as long as he entered the dragon pool, he could evolve into a dragon. It was really a little heart-wrenching. But when he continued to read the introduction, he was relieved. These dragons that evolved through the dragon pool will be 100% loyal to the host. It turned out that he had suffered so much and was going to be the boss after evolving into a dragon. And these guys seemed to evolve very easily as long as they entered the dragon pool. But after they evolved into dragons, they could only be his underlings. Creatures equivalent to the grand desolate master level weren't easy to find in the flaming origin continent. He would probably have to go to the hunting grounds after the 20th to find them. However, Immortal planned to take Happy to see the beautiful scenery of this world. So he didn't plan to go for the time being. Immortal looked at the Sea Heart Waterfall. The terrain here was rather strange. He probed with his dragon will. However, after probing about 100 kilometers deep, he couldn't probe any further. It was as if something had stopped his dragon will. At this moment, Immortal wasn't interested in exploring. Half an hour later, they left the Sea Heart Waterfall. They hurried to North Pole Island. They had been on the road for about 3 months. They had seen almost all the scenery along the way. Gradually, as they got closer and closer to the north, the temperature dropped. Of course, with Immortal's current physique, he wasn't afraid of the cold at all. But Happy was afraid. Immortal bought a set of winter clothes for Happy. A thick white cloak, a white scarf, and white gloves. A white hat. Dressing up like this gave people a different feeling. 2 days later, they arrived at the North Sea. At this point, a thick layer of ice had formed on the surface of the sea. Immortal scanned the area with his dragon's will, but there was no one there. Immortal teleported to North Pole Island. Although North Pole Island was called an island, it was actually very large. It was said that the area was about the same as Wuxia on Earth. Such a huge area was a world of ice and snow. In this world of ice and snow, other than the white of the ground and the blue of the sky, there were almost no other colors. On the North Pole Island, there was a North Pole City. The people living in North Pole City were all gold diggers. These so-called gold diggers weren't real gold diggers, but rather looking for crystal ores. Geologists had long explored this continent. There was a small amount of crystal ores underground, which weren't worth building mines to mine. But there were often small amounts of crystal ores that were washed into the shallow layer of ice and snow by underground rivers, and were discovered by people. Gradually, some poor people who weren't so well off came here to try their luck and see if they could find crystal ores. In the early years, there were really people who were very lucky from time to time and became rich because they found crystal ores. Thus, a large number of people began to flood into North Pole Island to try their luck. They were known as gold diggers. Due to the increasing number of gold diggers, specific residential areas were formed on North Pole Island. In the end, a city was formed here, and it was called North Pole City. These people were all poor and didn't have much money to build a city. But they had to resist the wind and snow, and also resist the harassment of some wild beasts. So, they used local materials and cut ice to build a city and houses. Thus, North Pole City was also called Ice City. Immortal and Happy entered Ice City together. When these people looked at him and Happy, their gazes were not very kind. Happy was a little puzzled. She gently tugged at Immortal's sleeve. She meant that they didn't offend these people, so why did they seem to treat them as enemies? He gently patted Happy's hand, indicating that she didn't need to worry. Then, he plundered these people's dragon senses. After reading these people's memories, Immortal understood the whole story. It turned out that more than 200 kilometers northeast of North Pole City, the ice layer suddenly collapsed, revealing a huge ice cave. People all went to check the ice cave. What they saw was incredible. On the walls of the ice cave, there were tens of thousands of deep caves. Many people found crystal source ores in these caves. Thus, more and more people rushed into the ice cave. And now, almost every cave had been occupied by people. Some people even fought to seize these caves. So, when they saw outsiders, they thought that they were here to snatch their caves. After understanding this, Immortal shook his head and stopped paying attention to these people. He and Happy found a restaurant. After traveling for more than half a day, they wanted to eat a hot meal. The food here was very simple. Most of it was local desolate beast meat. As for vegetarian dishes, there were almost no vegetarian dishes. After all, it was easy to imagine how difficult it was to grow vegetables in this world of ice and snow. However, the desolate beast meat was cooked very well. Immortal was also hungry. He ate in big mouthfuls. Happy also had a good appetite and ate some. While they were eating, the waiter in the restaurant came over to pour them some water. Esteemed guests, you're also here for the ice cave, right? Then you're really late. Now, all the caves in the ice cave have been occupied. Immortal shook his head and said, "We're only here to admire the aurora borealis." The waiter was stunned. "You traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers just to see the aurora borealis?" Immortal nodded. The waiter nodded. "You two are really in a good mood." Immortal knew that the waiter clearly didn't believe him. However, he didn't care. But since the waiter mentioned the ice cave, he planned to go take a look with Happy after they finished admiring the aurora borealis. After all, they had already traveled hundreds of thousands of kilometers. If they didn't go take a look, they would have doubts in their hearts. What was in the ice cave? Chapter 490. 490, Aurora. The next morning, before dawn, Immortal and Happy arrived at the east side of East Pole City. At this moment, a green light screen seemed to be hanging down from the sky. And this light screen was still shaking. After a while, the light screen gradually turned blue, alternating between blue and green. In the dark blue night sky, the light screen was shaking faster and faster. It was as if the fairies in the sky were washing muslin. After a while, the light screen calmed down. Immortal turned to look at Happy. He saw that Happy seemed to be very shocked. When she was on Earth, most of her childhood memories were spent in the base. After coming to the Flaming Continent, she basically lived on Hunting Island 1. She had never seen such a magical scene. Behind them, on the city wall of East Pole City, a few guards looked at Immortal and Happy's backs from afar and discussed. "They can't really be here to see the aurora, right? You're talking nonsense. Have you ever heard of someone running hundreds of thousands of kilometers just to see the aurora? I think it's strange too, but if they want to rob those ice caves, why don't they hurry up and go there instead of wasting time here? Who knows what they're up to? Anyway, they definitely don't have good intentions." Happy seemed to like the aurora. So Immortal stayed in North Pole City for a few more days. He watched the aurora for 5 days. And during these 5 days, the ice cave also changed. It was said that several major forces of the Flaming Continent had already sent people to take a look. Finally, on the 6th day, the 3 most powerful forces of the Flaming Continent, the Ancient Flame Sect, the Ancient Dragon Sect, and the Mystic Moon Sect, had already sent a large number of disciples to North Pole Island. After coming to North Pole Island, they didn't go to North Pole City, but went directly to the huge ice cave. The 3 sects were basically led by one of their elders. Each sect sent 200 to 300 people. When the gold diggers saw the people of the 3 sects arrive, they all subconsciously retreated. and none of the gold diggers dared to say a word. Although they were unhappy, in the face of the three most powerful forces of the flaming continent, what did they dare to say? Did they not want to live anymore? The first-ranked elder of the Flame Origin Ancient Sect extended his hand and gestured to the other two sections. They wanted the two sects to make the announcement. However, the elders of the two sects returned the greeting and made an inviting gesture at the same time. The two sects did not dare to be arrogant in front of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect. The elder of the Ancient Flame Sect nodded his head. What he meant was that since that was the case, he would gladly oblige. Although he didn't intend to give in, he still had to be polite on the surface. Then, he turned to the last disciple of the Flame Dawn Ancient Sect leader and said, "Jiao Ping, you do it." Jiao Ping was the sect master's personal disciple. He was also the next sect master who was appointed by the sect master. Nowadays, the sect master rarely showed himself. The affairs of the sect were all handled by a few elders. And now, these elders are consciously pushing Jiao Ping out. Now that he had reached the Grand Desolate Master level, it was time for him to slowly take over the Flame Beginning Ancient Sect. That Jiao Ping had a handsome appearance, and he looked refined and courteous, like a modest gentleman. He didn't have the arrogance of the disciples of the other sections. He cupped his fists and bowed to the thousands of gold diggers present. Then he said, "Everyone, it's a good thing that you found crystal source ore in this cave. Our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect is also happy to see everyone become rich. However, a few days ago, the experts of our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect, Ancient Dragon Gate, and Mystic Moon Female Sect have analyzed these caves and found that there is a certain gas element inside. This gas element has never appeared in our Flame Dawn continent before. According to our research, this gas is extremely unstable and can easily explode. Furthermore, this gas came from a hunting ground called Earth. When the gold diggers heard this, they were all shocked. From a hunting ground? How was that possible? One had to know that in theory, the gas from Earth could have been brought to the Flame Dawn continent by humans. However, it was impossible for it to appear in this cave. Therefore, there must be something fishy about this. Jiao Ping paused and looked at the gold diggers around him. Then he continued, "Therefore, our Flame Dawn Ancient Sect, Ancient Dragon Gate, and Mystic Moon Female Sect plan to work together to find out what dangers are in this cave. Before we figure out the dangers in this cave, it's best for everyone to stay away from this ice cave." The gold diggers looked at each other. In the end, a few gold diggers said, "In that case, the three sects are also thinking about everyone's safety. We thank the three sections." Saying this, he cupped his fists towards the three sects and slowly left. With the first, the second and third were simple. Then, more and more gold diggers turned and left. Of course, they didn't believe Jiao Ping's words. These gold diggers couldn't survive in other places on the Flame Dawn continent, so they came to the North Pole Island. They had experienced the coldness of human nature and seen all kinds of people. They naturally knew that Jiao Ping's words were just empty words. In fact, the three sects clearly knew that there were many caves here and that there were many crystal source ores in these caves, so they wanted to take over these caves. They made it sound dignified, but they were actually a bunch of bandits. However, in front of the three sects, no one dared to resist. They could only grit their teeth and swallow it down. The disciples of the three sects watched as the gold diggers around them gradually left. Although they didn't say anything, their faces were expressionless. However, their eyes revealed a hint of pride. This was the strength of the three great sections. This was the pride of the disciples of the three sections. In the entire Flame Dawn continent, no faction dared to fight against the three sections. It was also at this time that Immortal and Happy arrived. When they saw the gold diggers slowly leaving, Happy was a bit puzzled. Immortal casually plundered the memories of one of the gold diggers and understood the whole story. He shook his head slightly, but didn't care. In this world, there were many hardships. He wasn't the parents of these gold diggers, nor was he their friend. He had no obligation to stand up for them. If he had to intervene every time he encountered injustice, then he wouldn't be able to do anything in his life. At this time, one of the gold diggers saw that Immortal and Happy were still going forward. He sneered and muttered to himself, "The three sects have already taken over the catacombs, and there are still people looking for trouble." Some people even stopped and turned to look at Emosher's back. They were waiting to see Emosher make a fool of himself. Chapter 491. Who the hell is he? The gold diggers saw Emosher and Happy walking against the flow of people to the edge of the ice cave. They all sneered inwardly. It was obvious that the three great sects knew that there was a crystal source ore in the ice cave, so they wanted to occupy it. These two people actually still wanted to go over. This was clearly looking for trouble. Especially when they saw that this guy had brought along such a beautiful and innocent girl, they were even more displeased. How could such a brainless guy have a girlfriend? God must be blind. Yeah, a guy like him deserves to be single for the rest of his life. It doesn't matter if he goes looking for trouble, but it'll be a pity if he ends up hurting that girl. While these people discussed among themselves, Emosher dragged Happy to the edge of the ice cave. At the edge of the ice cave, a few disciples of the ancient dragon sect were secretly pleased when they saw that the gold diggers had no choice but to turn around and leave in front of the three great sections. However, at this moment, they saw two youngsters walking against the flow of people toward them. They could not help but sneer. Were these two people trying to challenge the prestige of the three great sects? An ancient Dragon Gate disciple shouted from 20 meters away. The three great sects are conducting business, so all unrelated people should make way. Don't you know? Emosher smiled faintly when he heard this. The three great sects are so domineering. The disciples of the ancient dragon sect had originally thought that the two of them would retreat in fear after hearing the names of the three great sections. Unexpectedly, this guy knew that they were the three great sects, yet he still dared to confront them directly. Was he crazy? Those disciples were a little angry at this time, and walked towards Emosher's side. A disciple said coldly, "Who do you think you're talking to?" Just as he said this, his voice suddenly paused. It was as if someone had grabbed him by the neck when he was halfway through his sentence. When the others saw this disciple's strange behavior, they were somewhat puzzled. "What's wrong?" Only then did the disciple open his mouth and point at Emosher. He is. Before he could finish speaking, the other ancient Dragon Gate disciples saw Emosher's face clearly. Suddenly he was shocked, as if thunder had exploded in his heart. Their gazes had been fixed on Happy, and they did not pay much attention to Emosher. This was practically the nature of every normal man. At this moment, they finally saw Emosher's face. His island master This, when they recognized Emosher, they immediately felt that a disaster was imminent. After all, the sect had issued an order. He ordered all disciples not to provoke Island Master Emo. If they offended Island Master Emo, they would have to bear the consequences themselves. The sect would have nothing to do with them. There were even disciples who privately spread rumors that if they really offended this Island Master Emo, the sect would directly clean up the sect in order to avoid attracting trouble. They didn't know what kind of ability this Mr. Mo had to make the higher-ups of the sect so afraid. But from this, it could be seen that this Island Master Mo was definitely not simple. And now, the few of them had actually offended Island Master Mo. How could they not be terrified? Amidst the panic, a disciple was the first to react. He hurriedly walked towards Emosher, bowed deeply and said, "I'm sorry, Island Master. I was blind and didn't recognize you. I'm really sorry for offending you." The few people behind him also reacted. They took a few steps forward and apologized to Emosher. "Island Master Emo, we were blind. Please forgive us." Emosher sneered and said, "Aren't the three great sects very domineering? Why did they suddenly change their masks?" Although the few people were mocked by Emosher, they did not dare to slight him in the slightest. They all lowered their heads. Sorry, sir. We were wrong. We should have been slapped." As they spoke, they actually started slapping themselves. As long as Island Master Mo mentioned the mistakes that they had committed in front of their sect's upper echelons, they would very likely be expelled from their sect. In the distance, the gold diggers who were originally retreating were planning to laugh at Emosher. But when they saw this scene, they were all dumbfounded. Look at those ancient dragon sect disciples. What's going on? Slapping themselves? Damn, are they stupid? These are ancient dragon sect disciples. Isn't it too embarrassing for them to slap themselves? While they were shocked, they couldn't help but shift their gaze to Immortal. They had thought that Immortal was looking for trouble. He might even be seeking his own death. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that the ancient Dragon Gate disciples would slap themselves when they saw them. Even if these gold diggers scratched their heads, they still couldn't figure out the reason behind it. At this moment, Immortal saw that the ancient dragon sect disciples were slapping themselves, but he didn't stop them. He no longer paid any attention to them and directly walked past them. The ancient dragon sect disciples didn't dare to stop. It was only when Immortal and Happy were far away that the strength they used to slap themselves slowly lessened. In the end, when Immortal and Happy's figures were blocked by an ice hill, they came to a stop. At this moment, their cheeks were red and swollen. They were also a little dazed by their own slaps. They looked at each other. After a while, an ancient dragon sect disciple asked, "What should we do?" The moment this question was asked, they fell into silence again. What should they do? What could they do now? They could only listen to orders. The hearts of these people were all in a state of uneasiness and uneasiness. At this moment, someone suddenly remembered, "Hurry up and tell the sect about Island Master Mo's arrival. Perhaps this can be considered as making up for our mistakes." Therefore, they hurriedly contacted their uncle masters. When their martial uncles heard this, their hearts trembled. They asked, "Are you sure it's Island Master Mo?" Those people replied, "We didn't dare to verify his identity. However, he looks exactly the same as Island Master Mo's portrait that was passed down by the sect." When those martial uncles heard this, their hearts trembled again. One of them said, "Did you offend him?" Those people's voices were much lower. "We didn't mean to. We didn't recognize him at all." When those martial uncles heard this, they said, "You're on your own." With that, they hung up the call. They looked at each other in dismay once again. It's over. It's really over this time. Even their martial uncles said so. Weren't they really finished? At this moment, those martial uncles quickly reported this matter to the ancient dragon sect's elders. The ancient dragon sect's elders immediately notified the elders of the flame-beginning ancient sect and the mystic moon sect. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the three major sects were on high alert. Under such circumstances, Immortal and Happy slowly appeared in front of everyone's eyes. More than 1,000 people were present, but no one made a sound. Immortal was a little confused. What was going on? Chapter 492. When Immortal and Happy crossed an ice hill and appeared in front of the crowd. The crowd of more than 1,000 people actually stood in an orderly manner, all of them silently and solemnly. Not a single person uttered a single word. Immortal was a little surprised. However, after casually plundering the memories of two people to check, he knew the reason for this. They knew that he was coming. At this moment, three elders who looked to be in their 70s or 80s walked quickly towards Immortal. Two of them were men and one was a woman. The men were wearing the sect master robes of the ancient dragon sect and the flame dawn ancient sect. The woman was wearing a white robe with gray patterns on her sleeves. Obviously, she was an elder of the mystic moon female sect. They walked quickly to Immortal's side and said, "I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know that Island Master Mo would be coming. Please forgive me for not going out to meet you. I heard that a disciple offended Island Master Mo. Island Master Mo, please tell us what you want to do with them. It's time for our ancient Flame Dawn sect to reorganize our sect." Immortal did not pursue the matter. He only wanted to teach those people a lesson. There was no need to harp on it. After all, his current strength was second to none in the Flame Dawn continent. If he still harped on a few small fries like before, he would be too petty. He shook his head and asked, "Have the three sects found anything in this ice cave?" The three of them looked at each other. The elder from the Mystic Moon female sect spoke first. "We didn't find anything substantial. However, there are unknown gases in all the caves. We've done some preliminary research on the unknown gases, but we haven't come to any conclusions yet. Emosure didn't want to expose their true purpose. He only asked, "Do you mind if I go down and take a look?" The elders of the three sects did not dare to mind at all. No matter how unwilling they did not dare to show it on their faces. "Of course, please go ahead, Island Master Mo. However, Island Master Mo, we haven't explored the end of these caves. There might be danger inside, so for your safety, don't go too far after entering these caves." Emosure nodded and said, "Island Master, you got it." Then with a thought, a person that looked exactly like Emosure began to materialize beside him. At first, it was bones. The bones quickly extended and formed a complete human skeleton. Then, muscles and blood vessels appeared on the skeleton. There was also a heart in his chest. Finally, the skin covered the body. It formed a human being. A human that was exactly the same as Emosure. This was Emosure's virus clone. In the past, the virus clones could only be formed from the flesh and blood of infected people. But now, Emosure could already induce the virus, and then make the virus quickly divide and replicate. In the end, a complete individual was formed. When the crowd saw Emosure's method, they realized that he had created an exact replica of himself out of thin air. Furthermore, this person could blink and walk. It was no different from the main body. This made them all widen their eyes. What kind of godly method was this? However, this was only the beginning. Then the second, the third, the fourth, the 100th. A total of 100 doppelgangers were formed. Everyone was dumbfounded. Creating a doppelganger out of thin air was already shocking enough. Now, he had actually created 100 doppelgangers. This was simply not something that a human could do. After that, Emosure gave the order. Go! The 100 doppelgangers immediately jumped out of the large ice cave. Then, they randomly jumped into the caves on the walls of the ice cave. When the elders of the three major sects saw this, they all cried bitterly in their hearts. But they did not even dare to fart. Not to mention other things, just the method of creating 100 doppelgangers out of thin air was unheard of. In the face of such an expert, what else did they dare to say? Even if they knew that this expert was here for the crystal source ores, they did not dare to say anything. Emosure controlled the 100 doppelgangers and entered the 100 caves around the ice cave. These caves, as a whole, went downwards. They went deeper and deeper. After walking for more than 500 meters, his doppelgangers discovered that crystal source ores began to appear on the ground. At first, there were not many crystal source ores. They only appeared on the walls occasionally. After walking for another 5 kilometers, there were more and more crystal source ores. There were already specks of crystal source ores on the walls, as many as the stars in the sky. After walking for more than 10 kilometers, there were even more crystal source ores on the ground and on the ice walls on both sides. Furthermore, the top of his head was filled with crystal source ores. The crystal source ores emitted a fluorescent light, illuminating the entire cave green. Emosure had read some information about crystal source ores before. However, those crystal source ores were basically within 1 cubic meter. If there were 10 crystal source ores, it would be considered a very high-quality crystal source ores. Now, these crystal source ores were basically all over the walls of the cave. This greatly surprised Emosure. What was certain was that the crystal source ores here were not naturally formed. The caves here seemed to be man-made. The crystal source veins in this place were also artificially embedded in the surroundings. There were more than 1,000 caves here. He did not know how deep each cave was. If there were so many crystal source ores in each cave, then how many crystal source ores were there in the entire ice cave? Even the 3 great factions and the former dragon clan would not be able to take out such a huge amount of crystal source ores. What kind of person, what kind of faction would hide these crystal source ores here for? With such doubts in his mind, Emosure ordered each of his doppelgangers to use their dragon senses to explore the cave as they continued to walk forward. His doppelgangers walked along the crystal source ores corridor. They continued to explore the cave with their dragon senses. After walking for about 50 kilometers, there seemed to be no change in the surroundings. However, at this time, all of Immersive's doppelgangers seemed to have reached the end of the cave 50 kilometers in front of them. Their dragon senses could no longer explore the cave. Immersive was puzzled. He clearly felt that there was still space in front of him, but his dragon senses could not explore it. This feeling was the same as when he used his dragon senses to explore the cave at Full Heart Waterfall. While puzzled, he controlled his doppelgangers and continued to move forward. However, after walking for about 10 kilometers, something strange happened. Almost all of his doppelgangers lost contact with him in an instant. It was as if there was suddenly no signal. Immersive could not help but be shocked. Chapter 493. The scene just now was very strange. Immersive's clones didn't detect any danger in the surroundings at all. But in an instant he lost contact with these clones. It was like a phone suddenly losing its signal. Immersive frowned slightly. When the elders of the three major sects saw Immersive frown, their hearts trembled slightly. But before Immersive said anything, none of them dared to say anything to disturb Immersive. After a while, Immersive turned around and said to the elders of the three major sects, "Continue. You guys can continue." Then he brought Happy and left the ice cave. He didn't know what kind of danger was in the ice cave. But losing contact with his clones just now made him feel uneasy. So he decided to leave this place for the time being. The three elders hurriedly lowered their heads and said, "Yes, yes." But when they came back to their senses, they all felt strange. Could it be that Island Master Mo didn't come for the crystal source, or? But if he came for the crystal source, or, why did he suddenly leave? The three elders looked at each other in dismay. But after a while, they suppressed the doubts in their hearts. Although they didn't know why Island Master Mo suddenly left, it was a good thing that he left. As long as Island Master Mo left, the crystal source or here would be divided equally among the three major sections. No other forces would dare to fight with them. Of course, they also kept an eye on it. Maybe Island Master Mo's clones just now found something wrong down there. Not a single one of his 100 clones came back. It's very likely that there's some kind of danger down there. So it's best that we don't act rashly for the time being. Let's report this situation to the sects first and then make a decision. That's all we can do. Thus, the three of them reported what they had just encountered to the sect. When the higher-ups of the three major sects heard that they had encountered Island Master Mo, they attached great importance to this matter. They also heard that Island Master Mo had hurriedly left after sending his 100 clones down. This made them even more interested in the ice cave and even more vigilant. Therefore, they sent more people and brought more equipment and instruments to explore the ice cave. As for Immersive, he had already left North Pole Island with Happy. Continue to travel the world, see all the beautiful sceneries in the world, and taste all the delicacies in the world. His days were spent comfortably and comfortably. 2 months later, news from the three major sects arrived. All the ice caves collapsed. About 500 disciples of the three major sects were trapped in the ice cave. The three great sects hurriedly organized people to rescue him day and night. Finally, on the 5th day, they managed to rescue the disciples. Contrary to their expectations, none of these disciples died except for some minor injuries and excessive fright. After that, the three sects brought the disciples back to their sections. On one hand, they arranged for specialized doctors to treat them, and on the other hand, they arranged for a psychiatrist to intervene and treat them after the psychological creation. In the beginning, everything went smoothly. The injuries of these disciples were quickly healed. The disciples who were shocked gradually calmed down. But on this day, something unexpected happened. The disciples of the Flame Dawn Ancient sect lived in an apartment. A female psychologist was counseling a disciple who had been overly shocked. She had a warm smile on her face and said, "He Fong, you've almost fully recovered. Today is the last treatment. After today, you can cultivate and live normally." The disciple nodded. "Thank you for taking care of me during this time." The psychologist smiled and shook her head. "It's what I should do." As she spoke, she turned around and packed her clothes, intending to leave. However, when she had just put on her coat and turned around, she was shocked, because He Fong, who was sitting on the chair just now, had already arrived behind her. He was face to face with her. The two of them were less than an inch apart. Moreover, there was a hint of fiery light in Hifeng's eyes. The psychologist was slightly taken aback and asked, "Hifeng, you..." It was fine if she didn't speak. When she said this, Hifeng's gaze became even more fervent. He suddenly reached out and grabbed the psychologist tightly. The psychologist repeatedly shouted, "Hifeng, this is not good. Let go of me, let go of me. If you don't let go, I'll scream." Only then did she understand that Hifeng already had ill intentions towards her. Hifeng ignored the psychologist's cries. His eyes flashed with a beast-like eagerness. He opened his mouth and bit down on the psychologist's neck. Hiss! This bite actually tore off a piece of flesh. The psychologist was in so much pain that she almost fainted. Her heart was filled with extreme fear. Just now, she thought that Hifeng was just going to do something beastly to her. She didn't expect this guy to become a real beast. "Help! Help me!" the psychologist screamed out in shock. A sharp and ear-piercing voice penetrated the door and echoed in the entire corridor. At the same time, she kept struggling. But her strength was far inferior to Hifeng's. She was tightly grabbed by Hifeng and couldn't escape at all. Crack! The door was kicked open. Two disciples of the Flame Dawn Ancient sect barged in. When they saw the scene in front of them, they were also stunned. There was a bloody hole in the psychologist's neck that was constantly spurting out blood. Hifeng's mouth and chest were full of blood. It was easy to guess what he was doing. F***CK. Hifeng, you son of a b***, what are you doing? Hifeng, I'm going to beat you to death. The two disciples pounced on Hifeng. When Hifeng saw this, he suddenly turned around and faced the two disciples. The strength of these two disciples was about the same as Hifeng. They had both reached level 10. But now, Hifeng was fighting without any regard for his life. And he didn't attack like a human. Instead, he pounced and bit like a beast. These two disciples were actually forced to retreat. During the battle, Hifeng bit another disciple's wrist. That disciple felt the pain and hurriedly retreated. Just as they were fighting, the third disciple had already jumped in through the window. He picked up the psychiatrist and pulled her out of the room. At the same time, more than 10 disciples had already rushed over from the corridor. These disciples worked together and condensed a genetic martial art. After breaking Hifeng's 2 legs and 2 arms, they were able to control him. At this moment, they took a closer look at Hifeng. They saw that Hifeng's eyes had already turned black. The fingertips of his hands were actually more than an inch long and were extremely hard. For fangs had also grown out of his mouth. He looked very scary. Although his arms and legs were broken, he didn't seem to care at all. It continued to try to get up and open its mouth to bite the disciples around it. Chapter 494. Immortal continued to tour the continent happily. On the other hand, the number 1 sect of the Flaming Origin continent, the Flaming Origin Ancient sect, was undergoing a drastic change. Hifeng was finally under control after biting 2 people in the Flaming Origin Ancient sect. The other disciple took the opportunity to rescue the female psychiatrist. When they looked at Hifeng again, the area around his eyes had turned greenish-black. Sharp claws and fangs had grown out. He was like a wild beast, constantly roaring. When he looked at the surrounding disciples, his gaze was like that of a bloodthirsty beast. A few disciples hurriedly went to inform their superiors. However, when their superiors hurried over, another scream was heard from the other side. A few more disciples hurriedly rushed in the direction of the scream. They saw that the female psychologist who was bitten just now had a mouth full of blood. Her eyes had turned greenish-black. 2 half-inch sharp teeth were exposed at the corner of her mouth. Her fingernails were also more than an inch long. When she saw these humans, her gaze was like that of a wild beast. When the other disciples saw this, they hurriedly went forward and tried to control the female psychologist. However, at this moment, another scream was heard from the other side. It turned out that the disciple who had his finger bitten off by Hifeng had also mutated. At the same time, in the Flaming Origin Ancient sect, the disciples' apartments were filled with screams. Disciples were mutating everywhere. One had to know that there were more than 80 disciples who were trapped in the ice cave. Now, these 80 disciples suddenly mutated at the same time. The surrounding disciples were caught off guard and were either scratched or bitten. Then they mutated one after another. The speed of mutation was not fast in the beginning. After being scratched, it would take more than 5 minutes for the mutation to take place. However, when the disciples who were scratched went to scratch others, the speed at which these people mutated became faster. The more people there were in the middle of the mutation, the faster the mutation speed. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. In less than 15 minutes, those who were scratched had their mutation speed reduced to 1 minute. When the higher-ups of the Flaming Origin ancient sect rushed over, more than 500 disciples had already been infected. When the elders of the Flaming Origin ancient sect saw this, they could only make up their minds and send out a wave of energy to kill these 500 disciples. After these 500 disciples were killed, all the remaining disciples fell silent. All of them wore pained expressions. Some of the disciples who were killed were their friends, while others were their brothers. Yet there was nothing they could do. They could only watch as their friends and brothers died here. However, their bitter and sorrowful emotions did not last long before they were replaced by shock. The muscles on the bodies of the mutated disciples who had been blasted into pieces of flesh and blood were wriggling rapidly. The wound was healing rapidly. There were even 2 disciples who were blasted into meat paste, but at this time, the meat paste was flowing. Then they quickly converged. The silhouette of a human began to emerge from the meat paste. When the surrounding people saw this, they were all terrified. The great elder shouted, "Everyone, step back." On the Flaming Origin continent, it wasn't rare for one to recover quickly after being injured. Even if some people were hit in the heart, they would be able to recover quickly in a short time. However, no matter who it was, as long as their head was blown off, there was basically no possibility of recovery. However, these 2 fellows had clearly been blasted into minced meat, yet they were still able to revive. How could this not make the crowd panic? The Great Elder, as a level 4 Grand Desolate Master, was unable to kill these 2 fellows. Moreover, it wasn't just these 2 fellows. The other mutated disciples who had just been blasted to death slowly stood up at this time. Seeing this, the Great Elder could only wave his right hand and condense an energy light shield. These mutated disciples were all shrouded in it. Those mutated disciples rushed towards the light shield one after another. However, the light shield did not move at all. Only then did the surrounding disciples let out a sigh of relief. At this moment, the other elders had also rushed over. After they understood the situation, they all began to speculate. Are they infected with some kind of virus? Is it the zombie virus? It doesn't seem like it. The zombie virus's infectivity is not so terrifying. Then what kind of virus is it? This needs to be carefully studied. After a simple discussion, they found a few virus specialists in the sect. The virus specialists put on their energy protective suits. This kind of energy protective suit had an outer and inner layer that was a normal physical protective suit. The interlayer in the middle was a layer of energy. This kind of energy was very good at isolating viruses. Basically, there was no known virus that could break through this kind of energy protective suit. After that, the Great Elder used the energy again to blast the mutated disciples within the light shield. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 2 disciples carefully passed through the light shield and entered the range of the virus. They planned to collect some virus samples. However, at this time, Sanguisurincus suddenly grew out of the blood on the ground. These Sanguisurincus seemed to be alive. They slowly climbed along the legs of the 2 experts, climbed up their energy protective suits, and climbed up their bodies. The 2 of them were not panicked at first. After all, they were wearing energy protective suits. However, soon, their faces revealed a look of horror. They saw that on these Sanguisurincus, there were many small spikes. These spikes were constantly stabbing the protective suits. There were many small holes in the protective suits. The Great Elder who was outside was shocked. These protective suits were all made of special materials. The protective properties were extremely good. Even knives and swords could not cut open a crack. Now, the spikes on these Sanguisurincus could actually pierce through the protective suits? He quickly shouted, "Both of you, get out of here." The two disciples hurriedly retreated out of the light shield. Just as they were retreating out of the light shield, the energy in the energy protective suits kept leaking out through the hundreds and thousands of small holes. When they reached the edge of the light shield, the energy in their protective suits had completely leaked out. At this time, the Sanguisurincus entangled their bodies again. The spikes kept stabbing their protective suits. The protective suit was easily pierced through as if it was made of paper. The two of them suddenly screamed in horror and pain. No. However, no matter how loudly they screamed, even if their elders were close by, they could not save them. On the contrary, the great elder saw that the two of them were beyond saving and raised his right hand. In his right hand, a mass of energy had already condensed. "Great elder, what are you doing?" "Great elder, please, I can still be saved." Boom! In the midst of their pleas, the two of them had already turned into two piles of blood. Chapter 495. The two disciples of the ancient flame sect had been killed by their grand elder. The other disciples in the surroundings were all extremely shocked. Although they knew that the grand elder had no choice but to do so. If the two disciples had escaped, it would have caused more casualties. It was obvious that they had been infected with some kind of virus. The grand elder had finally managed to control the virus with the energy shield. If they had escaped, it would not have been so easy to control them again. At the same time, the ancient dragon sect, which was ranked second on the Flaming Dawn continent, was experiencing the same thing. In the end, their sect master had used a similar method to trap the virus. The Mystic Moon sect, which was ranked third, was also experiencing the same outbreak. The sect master of the Mystic Moon sect had used the same method to control the virus. However, she had only used the energy shield to control the virus. Within the energy shield, the infected disciples had been killed countless times, but they were still able to survive. This caused everyone present to be extremely terrified. They reported this situation to the island masters of the various hunting islands on the continent. After watching the video of the scene, the island masters fell silent. Some of the island masters even had a trace of fear in their eyes. Viruses had always existed on the Flaming Dawn continent, especially on the hunting islands. The island masters of the hunting islands had developed all kinds of viruses in order to allow the creatures on the hunting grounds to continue to mutate. The most typical ones were the zombie virus, vampire virus, and werewolf virus. Among these four viruses, the zombie virus spread the fastest and was the most destructive. Therefore, all the island masters of the hunting islands strictly controlled these viruses. However, no matter how powerful a virus was, it could always kill its host. As long as the host of the virus was killed, the transmission of the virus would be greatly reduced. However, this new virus could not be killed at all. Not only could it not be killed, but it also consumed a lot of energy to maintain the energy shield. Once the energy supply ran out, the shield could break at any time, causing the virus to flow out again. Many research institutions on the hunting islands brought many professional instruments to the three sects to study these viruses. Although the virus could not be brought out of the shield, they could extend the instruments into the shield to investigate. In the end, after 3 days of research, they came to a conclusion. This virus was the zombie virus. However, it was not the traditional zombie virus, but a mutated one. They called it the new zombie virus. These new zombie viruses had a stronger ability to spread and were very difficult to kill. Therefore, the three major sects agreed to let the virus research institutions of the hunting islands stay in their sects to study the zombie virus. However, just 5 days later, the situation changed again. On the 5th day, faint green spots began to appear on the skin of these researchers. Especially around their eyes, dark circles began to appear. At first, they didn't pay much attention to it, thinking that it was just because they had stayed up late to work. But later, as time passed, more and more green spots appeared on their bodies, and they were getting bigger and bigger. They finally panicked. After a virus test, a new type of zombie virus was detected from their bodies. This filled the hearts of these staff members with despair. They had watched the videos about the new zombie virus and knew what happened to those infected with the new zombie virus. They didn't want to die. However, if they did not enter the light barrier, once their bodies were completely controlled by the virus, they would lose their consciousness and attack humans like wild beasts. Thus, after some hesitation, some virus researchers reported this matter to the higher-ups of the 3 major sections. At the same time, they did some research on the virus in their bodies. In the end, they came to a frightening conclusion. The new zombie virus could be spread through the air. The zombie virus was very scary, but it was only spread through contact. And this new zombie virus could actually be spread through the air. In other words, everyone who went to the North Pole Island could have been infected. And now, all the disciples of the 3 major sects could have been infected. This discovery caused the 3 major sects to be extremely panicked. They hurriedly organized their disciples to conduct a virus test. As a result, 30% of the disciples of the 3 major sects were infected. It must be known that the 3 major sects had more than 1 million disciples combined. 30% of the disciples were infected, which meant that more than 300,000 disciples had been infected. Moreover, although the rest of the disciples were not infected, the virus could be spread through the air. Therefore, every second they stayed in the sects increased their chances of being infected. Thus, the disciples of the 3 major sects who were not infected began to flee the 3 major sections. Although the higher-ups of the sects knew about this, they couldn't stop them. If they didn't let them escape, were they supposed to let them stay here and be infected? At this time, the 3 major sects could only place their hopes on those research groups. Unfortunately, the research groups held a pessimistic attitude toward the new zombie virus. Many researchers had already entered the energy barrier on their own. This was tantamount to suicide. However, there were also a small number of virus researchers who found an opportunity to escape the 3 major sections. Without a doubt, these researchers had all been infected by the virus. If they escaped from the 3 major sects, the consequences would be unimaginable. Although the 3 major sects did their utmost to search for them, there were still 5 fish that escaped the net in the end. No one knew where they had fled to. The several hundred researchers who had been captured could only forcibly send them into the energy barrier. Previously, they had made a lot of contributions and sacrifices in order to research the virus. But now, if they were to leave, the whole continent might be in huge trouble. This was the truth. Although they couldn't bear it, they still had to send them into the energy barrier. However, although the 3 major sects barely managed to control the situation, they weren't the only ones who had entered the ice cave at that time. On the North Pole Island, many gold diggers had entered the ice cave. Even those who hadn't been to the ice cave had gone to the edge of the ice cave. And these people had basically all been infected by the new zombie virus. Therefore, this was a huge hidden danger. Although the 3 major sects thought of many methods, it was useless. In the end, they could only release a joint announcement to the world. Joint announcement from the Ancient Flame Sect, Ancient Dragon Sect, and Mystic Moon Female Sect. A new zombie virus has entered the flaming continent. This virus can be transmitted through the air and through contact. Remind everyone on the flaming continent to prepare a gas mask. If you encounter a person with a green body, black eye circles, fangs, and sharp claws, run away as soon as possible. Don't try to kill them, because they can't be killed. Chapter 496. This joint announcement caused an uproar in the entire flaming land. Although the 3 sects were very domineering most of the time, they would find some high-sounding reasons to do things. But for such a big event to be jointly announced by the 3 sects, it couldn't be fake. For a time, the entire flaming land was in a state of panic. All the major forces began to seal their gates. All the hunting islands began to seal their islands. Although it would cost a lot. But compared to human lives, no matter how big the price, it was not worth mentioning. After contacting the 3 sects and confirming the authenticity of the incident, the government also began to seal the roads and cities. Even the government confirmed that it was true, so the people naturally knew that it couldn't be fake. Therefore, all the gas masks in the shopping malls and shops were sold out. As cultivators, many people could hold their breath for a long time. Even after becoming a hunter, it was not difficult to hold their breath for a month. But no one could hold their breath forever. So people were crazily fighting for gas masks. And all the manufacturers of gas masks were also speeding up the production of gas masks. Many manufacturers that did not produce gas masks in the past also opened many gas mask production lines. But even so, it was far from enough for everyone to buy a gas mask. After all, the population of the Flaming Land was as high as 50 trillion. The daily production of gas masks in the Flaming Land was only a little more than 100,000. This was because almost everyone in the Flaming Land was a cultivator. Most of the time, if they encountered a special situation, they could survive by holding their breath. There was no need to use gas masks. Only those who worked in poisonous gas all year round could use gas masks. While people were crazily fighting for gas masks. In a remote mountain village. One night, a disciple who had escaped from the Flaming Land ancient sect sneaked in. In the middle of the night, there was a burst of screams in the village. This scream woke up all the villagers in the village. What followed was more than half an hour of screams. Half an hour later, the village fell into silence. All the villagers fell into a pool of blood. The next morning, many zombies appeared in the village. All of them had green faces and fangs. Their eyes were dead. Then they ran in all directions. These zombies were not as stupid as zombies. Among these zombies, even the lowest level zombies were transformed from hunters. Therefore, not only were they very strong, but their intelligence was also higher than normal humans. Of course, the most terrifying thing was that they couldn't be killed at all. Even a grand desolate master would not be able to do anything to them. Left with no other choice, they could only resort to methods that they had no other choice. That was nuclear weapons. After confirming that there was no one in a certain place, they would use nuclear flattening on those places. As a result, many places on the Flaming Dawn continent were devastated. When the people on Hunting Island No. 1 heard about this, they all felt a sense of familiarity. They had experienced such an apocalyptic world back on Earth. What was happening on the Flaming Dawn continent was nothing more than a reenactment of the apocalypse on Earth. As for the fact that the virus could not be killed, they were not worried. Their dragon master, Mr. Mo, had brought them all the way from Earth. In less than 3 years, they had reached the peak of the Flaming Origin continent. No matter how ferocious the virus was, the Dragon Lord would be able to resolve it for them. As for Mo, he had a strange feeling. He felt that it was very ironic. Of course, it was not ironic to himself, but to the humans on the Flaming Dawn continent. The people on the Flaming Dawn continent treated each planet as a hunting ground and threw the virus on these planets. Then they hunted the creatures on these hunting grounds. Now, the zombie virus had also appeared on the Flaming Dawn continent. The Flaming Dawn continent had also fallen into an apocalyptic disaster. It was really the cycle of the heavens and retribution. However, he was also thinking about how these viruses had come about. Could it be that creatures from a higher dimension had thrown these viruses onto the Flaming Dawn continent? Of course, Emoshir's idea was just his wild guess. He still had to take a look at these viruses. He had to see where these viruses came from. So on this day, he came to the known origin of the viruses, North Pole Island. He hovered above North Pole Island and used his dragon sense to investigate below. He saw that the entire North Pole city was almost filled with zombies. The people living here were the first to be infected. There used to be more than 50,000 people living on North Pole Island. Now, there were more than 50,000 new zombies here. He used the demon dragon's eye to look at these zombies, and the attributes of these zombies quickly appeared in his mind. Species, General Corpse. Level 3 General Corpse, equivalent to Level 3 Scavenger. Special ability, Immortality. Emoshir was a little confused. What was a General Corpse? The system's voice sounded frowny face, one of the 4 great zombie ancestors, Xianxia. The zombies infected by him are called General Corpses. General Corpses have the trait of immortality, so they are also called immortal corpses. Hearing this, Immersive's heart skipped a beat. Once, when he was on Earth, he had seen an owl. At first, he thought that the owl had been infected with the zombie virus. But later, he found that the owl could not be killed. At that time, when he used the demon blood's eye to look, he found that the owl had the heart of Xianxia and could not be killed. He did not expect to encounter zombies infected by Xianxia after coming to the Flaming Dawn continent. Immersive pondered for a moment and planned to use memory plunder to check the memories of these zombies. He wanted to see where they came from. However, under his investigation, he found that the memories of these zombies were completely chaotic. He could not find anything. Immersive did not investigate further. With a thought, he said in his mind, "System, select the reward check-in and sign in the demon-suppressing orb." The system's voice quickly sounded. "This check-in will consume 1.5 million evolution points. Confirm check-in?" Immersive glanced at the balance of evolution points in his mind. He saw that behind the 3 words evolution points was a long string of numbers. As for how many trillions of evolution points there were, he was too lazy to count. Ever since he came to the Flaming Dawn continent, evolution points were rarely used. But as long as he killed infected creatures, he would always receive the corresponding evolution points. "Confirm check-in," Immersive said. Soon, a walnut-sized orb appeared in his backpack. This bead was sparkling and translucent. It was an orb nurtured by the dragon's body and was full of righteousness. A single orb could suppress 10,000 demons. Immersive had used it once in the vampire's lair on Earth. After that, because it consumed too many evolution points, he never used it again. Today, he would try to see if this demon-suppressing orb was still as powerful when it encountered a general corpse. Chapter 497. With a thought, Immersive took out the demon-suppressing orb from his system backpack. The orb's surface looked crystal clear. But if one looked closely, they would find that it contained some kind of extremely violent energy. This kind of energy was very unfamiliar to Immersive. It was not like the energy in human cultivators' bodies. It was also not like the energy in zombies, or desolate beasts' bodies. At this moment, the zombies below also noticed Immersive in the sky. They immediately jumped into the air. These general corpses could not fly, but they could all jump very high. Even the lowest level 1 general corpse could jump up to more than 10 meters high. As for the mutated general corpses, which were equivalent to desolate hunters, they could jump up to 100 meters high. Immersive slightly increased his altitude. He let himself reach a height of more than 700 meters. These general corpses would no longer be able to reach him. Then, he held the demon-suppressing orb in his right hand. At a certain moment, his right index finger and thumb loosened. The demon-suppressing orb quietly fell. As the general corpses around it kept jumping up, it quietly fell from the middle of these general corpses as if it was weightless. Some general corpses also noticed the falling orb. They pounced straight at the orb. They reached out to grab the orb. However, after the orb fell into their hands, it was not affected at all. And their hands were like snow meeting burning charcoal. A hole was melted in their hands. A few more general corpses pounced over. But these general corpses' bodies were all pierced through by the orb. This orb seemed to be falling gently. However, nothing could affect its whereabouts. A moment later, it slowly landed. The next moment, a blood-red light instantly burst out from within the orb. This blood-red light was extremely dazzling. Everything within a 10-kilometer radius had turned into a blood-red world. There was no sound, only the blood-red color that filled all the space. A moment later, the blood-red color disappeared. And half of all the general corpses within 10 kilometers disappeared. The general corpses 10 kilometers away only saw the sudden appearance of the red light. A moment later, the red light disappeared. Their kind had already disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had never appeared in this world. Each and every one of them was greatly shocked. These corpse generals seemed to only know how to run around like headless flies. But that was because they couldn't be killed. Therefore, they were fearless and pressed forward courageously. However, one had to know that their IQ was higher than that of normal humans. How could they not be alarmed when they suddenly saw their companion disappear so inexplicably? Overwhelmed with fear, the corpse generals began to flee in all directions. When Immortal saw this, he couldn't help but shake his head. A general corpse was nothing more than this. Actually, it wasn't that the general corpse wasn't powerful. Immortal's demon-suppressing orb was simply too powerful. At this moment, Immortal looked into his mind. The kill points in his mind had already reached 4 billion. As long as he could get 6 billion kill points, he would be promoted to a level 10 Desolate Hunter. This meant that if he killed ordinary general corpses, he would only get 1 kill point for every 10 general corpses. But don't forget that many parts of the continent have been infected. Moreover, judging from the rate at which the zombie virus was spreading, it would probably spread across the entire continent very soon. There were hundreds of billions of Desolate Hunters on the entire continent. Therefore, it wouldn't be difficult for him to become a level 10 Desolate Hunter. However, Immortal didn't want the entire continent to be infected by the virus. If the entire continent was infected by the virus, even if he eliminated all the virus in the end, there would only be a few people left on Hunting Island 1. What was the point? At this moment, Immortal looked down at the general corpses that were fleeing in all directions. He wasn't too satisfied with the attack range of the demon-suppressing orb. His draconic will moved and blasted at the general corpses. Boom 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 boom. The general corpses all exploded. But in just a moment, the general corpses recovered to their original state. Immortal shook his head slightly. In the past, whether it was the zombie virus or other viruses, his draconic will could suppress their recovery ability. But now, it seemed that his draconic will had no effect on the zombie virus. He could only ask in his mind, "System, can the demon-suppressing orb be upgraded?" The system's voice replied frowny face yes, but after the upgrade, the evolution points required for each check-in will increase by 10 times. Immortal nodded, then upgrade it. Soon, the system's voice sounded frowny face upgrade successful. After the upgrade, each designated check-in will consume 15 million evolution points. Immortal looked at the evolution points in his mind. There were so many that he felt it was just a string of numbers. He said, "System, designate the demon-suppressing orb to check-in." Check-in successful. Check-in reward. 1 demon-suppressing orb. Immortal moved his mind and took out the upgraded demon-suppressing orb from his backpack. The upgraded demon-suppressing orb was no longer the size of a walnut. Instead, it was the size of a fist. He narrowed his eyes and carefully sensed it. The energy contained in this demon-suppressing orb was dozens of times more powerful than the previous demon-suppressing orb. Immortal let go of his hand gently. The demon-suppressing orb was still like rain, slowly falling. After a moment, it landed gently. The moment it landed, a dazzling red light appeared again. But this time, the range of the dazzling red light expanded by 10 times. Within a radius of 100 kilometers, all infected humans and animals were instantly annihilated in this red light. When the red light disappeared, this world of ice and snow seemed so clean and clear. There was not a trace of impurities. Immortal looked down at this world wrapped in silver and snow and shook his head slightly. The world here was supposed to be like this. He moved his mind and instantly teleported to the edge of the ice cave. He saw that the ice cave had already collapsed. Only a huge ice cave with a radius of more than 10 kilometers was left. Immortal used his dragon will to carefully investigate this place, but he did not find anything else. He paused for a moment before rushing in the direction of the first hunting island. The first hunting island had the support of the Dragon Palace. Its current defense could defend against attacks below the Grand Desolate Master level. But these general corpses were immortal. Even the defense of the Dragon Palace could not destroy those immortal general corpses. From what Immortal knew, it seemed that only the demon-suppressing orb could destroy those immortal general corpses. Of course, he had not tried the dragon-slaying saber, nor had he tried other methods. But no matter how strong the other methods were, it was still his personal ability. And if the entire continent was infected, and only the first hunting island was not infected in the end, countless general corpses would swarm towards the first hunting island. Then, no matter how strong his personal ability was, it would be impossible for him to stop the almost endless general corpses. Therefore, he had to sign in more demon-suppressing orbs. And other than that, he had to think of other ways. Chapter 498. Sure returned to Hunting Island number 1. Every day, he would sign in, and sign in again. He had 2 sign-in opportunities a day to sign in the demon-suppressing orb. Then, he would distribute these demon-suppressing orbs to the people in the base, telling them that they could only use them when they were attacked by the infected. At the same time, Sure was also constantly paying attention to the new developments of the zombie virus on the continent. Official news, June 1st. A new zombie virus appeared in 3 states. June 2nd. A new zombie virus appeared in the 4th state. June 5th. A new zombie virus appeared in the 5th state. June 10th. A new zombie virus appeared in 7 states. The new virus can be spread through the air, and the new zombies can't be killed. All citizens are advised to wear a gas mask and hide in a safe place as soon as possible when encountering the new zombie. Do not have any contact with the new zombie. June 12th. Some people had already escaped to other planets on spaceships. But resources were limited. At present, only those who passed the test of the new zombie virus and reached the level of a hunter or above could escape to other planets on spaceships. Sure looked at the shocking reports in these places. Looking at the map of the flaming beginning continent, at first, only a few states had a few red dots. Gradually, more and more red dots appeared in these places. Red dots appeared in other states one after another. He remembered a game he played when he was on Earth. Plague Incorporated. The changes in the map in front of him were very similar to the scene in Plague Incorporated. Plague Incorporated. In the end, the humans on Earth were almost extinct. And the map of the entire Earth turned blood red. Seeing this, Sure's mood was also very low. Although he was not a saint and did not have to grieve for the death of everyone. But if all the humans in this world died, even if he survived, there would be no meaning in living. In fact, he had thought about using the demon-suppressing orb to destroy all the zombies in the places where there were zombies when the virus first broke out. But the virus spread too quickly. And he could only sign in at most 2 demon-suppressing orbs a day. And the flaming beginning continent was too big. Even if he kept teleporting to these places, it would be too late to stop it. In the flaming beginning ancient sect, several elders in the sect used their powerful strength to trap the virus in an energy shield. But that was all. Most of their disciples had already left. Only the desolate hunters and above were left. They planned to send the disciples who were desolate hunters and above onto the spaceship and let them escape to other planets. At the very least, they wanted to preserve the bloodline of the ancient flame sect. However, the elders couldn't make such a decision. They had to ask the sect master to make a decision. It's all because of you that I became like this. I'll stew you and feed you to the dogs. The faces of the 10 elders were filled with shock and anger. However, when they heard this, they all trembled. The first elder swallowed his saliva and asked tentatively, "Sect master?" The lowly cursed angrily. "Nonsense, if it's not me, who else can it be?" When the first elder heard this, he immediately knelt on the ground. His eyes were full of fear. The other elders also knelt on the ground at the same time. "Welcome back, sect master. Welcome back, sect master." The lowly pointed at the 10 elders who were kneeling on the ground and cursed. "Come out? Come out, your sister. I was going to break through to a level 10 grand desolate master and reach a higher realm. If I want to reach a higher realm, I have to use my consciousness to traverse space. When traversing space, my consciousness will be attached to the people in the other space. As long as I traverse space 81 times, I will be able to break through and reach a higher realm. I've already traversed space 79 times. I only need 2 more. Damn it, you guys messed up my traversing. Now, my body has traversed to another space, and my consciousness has brought this body back. Are you satisfied?" When the elders heard this, they were all sweating profusely. How could such a thing happen? However, the actions of the person in front of them were undoubtedly their sect master. In his anger, the sect master looked at the sky. He sighed. Sigh, it's all my dead father's fault. Of all the names he could give me, he actually called me Luoli. Now, I'm really a lowly. Damn it. Chapter 499. The sect master of the ancient flame sect had always been like this. He would curse first. After cursing, he would think about how to solve the problem. The 10 elders knew that the sect master was like this, so when the sect master cursed, none of them made a sound. They all listened quietly. 5 minutes later, the sect master finished cursing, and the first elder spoke. Sect master, we have disturbed your breakthrough and caused you to become like this. We are all very guilty. No matter what you want to do with us, we won't dare to complain. But there is something urgent that needs to be solved. Sect Master Raleigh's mouth was dry from all the cursing. He directly spread his legs and sat on the steps in front of the Qingkuan Tower. He said, if you have something to say, say it quickly. Once you are done, I will go back and find a way to get my original body back. The first elder couldn't help but twitch his eyes. Because when the sect master sat, the first elder could see the sect master's body from his position. He couldn't help but want to remind the sect master that he was exposed. But after thinking about it, he held back. He said, Sect master, there is a new zombie virus that is very powerful. Not only does it spread quickly through the air, but the virus can't be killed with the current methods of the flaming origin continent. It has a trend of becoming a pandemic. The major sects have already transferred their disciples above the desolate hunter realm to other planets. I've discussed with a few elders, and we've decided to transfer some of our disciples to other planets. But this is a serious matter, and we have to get the sect master's permission. That is why we have disturbed the sect master's breakthrough. Raleigh heard this and had a look of disdain. He cursed, What are you elders doing? Our ancient flame sect is the #1 sect in the world, and we have a deep foundation. Can't you even deal with a small virus? Do you still need to escape to other planets? Don't you know that the flaming origin continent is the most suitable planet for us to live on and has the most resources? The elders lowered their heads and didn't dare to answer. Only the first elder mustered the courage to speak. We are incompetent. Sect master, if you have a way to deal with the new zombie virus, please do it and save the disciples of the ancient flame sect from the abyss of suffering. Laurie tossed the ponytail on his shoulder to the back and said, It's just a small matter, yet you still need this sect master to personally take action. I'm so tired of being the sect master. Let's go, take me there. As he spoke, he stood up. However, when she stood up, her ponytail slid down her shoulders again. Laurie impatiently flung him behind him and scolded, That's right. F*CKU. When the elders saw this, they wanted to laugh but did not dare to. He could only forcefully hold it in. The first elder heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that the sect master had finally stood up. Finally, he didn't have to look up to see Fat too. Soon, they arrived before the light barrier with Luoli. Luoli saw that there were already more than 50 disciples within the light barrier. The faces of the disciples turned pale. There were thick dark circles around his eyes. All of them had green faces and fangs, looking very frightening. When they saw Luoli coming over, they all rushed towards him through the light shield. Although it was blocked by the light barrier, it still looked very scary. The first elder next to him explained, They are all infected with the new zombie virus and can't be killed at all. No matter if it's physical, energy, or any other means, even if their heads are blown up, they can recover in a short time. When Luoli heard this, he flung his ponytail behind him and said, F***, such a powerful virus. Let me try. As she spoke, a ball of fiery red energy condensed in her hands. She waved this energy out. This ball of energy entered the light barrier. As soon as it entered the light barrier, it exploded. The glaring red light made almost everyone present feel as if they were blinded in an instant. However, this explosion did not make any sound. It was like watching a star explode in the universe. It looked very powerful, but no sound could be heard. When the red light gradually faded, everyone's vision returned to normal. At this moment, when they looked inside the light barrier again, there were no longer any green-faced disciples with fangs. There was nothing there. When the first elders saw this, they were all shocked. They had tried all kinds of methods these days, but they couldn't do anything about the zombie virus. Now, the sect leader just casually waved a ball of energy and completely destroyed those zombies. What kind of strength did the sect leader have? Sect leader Luo Li seemed to have seen through everyone's doubts. She waved her hand impatiently and said, "When you're lucky enough to be as strong as me, you'll naturally know. There's nothing to be surprised about. The most important thing now is to quickly summon all the disciples back. I went into seclusion and all of you killed all the disciples of my ancient flame sect. *CK. When the first elders heard this, they nodded. Yes, sect leader. Next, Luo Li used the energy to cleanse the entire ancient flame sect. This scene made everyone's eyes widen. The first elder was a level 6 Grand Desolate Master, but he could only use the energy barrier to cover a radius of a few kilometers. However, the sect leader used the energy to cleanse the entire ancient flame sect. One had to know that the mountain where the ancient flame sect was located on was at least 100 kilometers wide. This was the difference between them. Next, the disciples of the ancient flame sect received the news and returned to the ancient flame sect. When the rest of the people heard the news, they quickly gathered around the ancient flame sect. They weren't disciples of the ancient flame sect and couldn't go up the mountain. However, in the entire continent, only the sect leader of the ancient flame sect could eliminate the virus. Therefore, it would be safer for them to stay near the flame-beginning ancient sect than anywhere else. Gradually, the disciples of the other factions who were unable to ride a flying ship started to gather around the Flame Dawn ancient sect. In an instant, there were tens of millions of people within 100 kilometers of the ancient flame sect. Gradually, the news spread far and wide. Even many people from other prefectures rushed to the ancient flame sect when they heard the news. After hearing this news, Immortal was also somewhat puzzled in his heart. How did the sect leader of the ancient flame sect kill the corpse general virus? However, it was still a good thing that there was someone who could kill the corpse general virus. However, the sect leader of the ancient flame sect and Immortal were far from enough. The number of infected people on the continent was still increasing rapidly. The map of the continent was also turning red. Chapter 500. Immortal could only shake his head and sigh helplessly when he saw the map gradually turning red. The virus was so aggressive that even he couldn't stop it. The only thing he could do was to protect the first hunting island. Of course, other than getting 2 demon-suppressing orbs every day, he didn't idle around. Although he had a lot of evolution points, it consumed 30 million evolution points every day. If he didn't have any income, it wouldn't be long before he used up all his points. Therefore, he still had to hunt these general corpses every day to obtain kill points and evolution points. On a mountain more than 200 kilometers away from the Mystic Moon sect, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect led the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to set up camp in the city. All the desolate hunters of the Mystic Moon sect had already left the flaming continent by flying ship. Originally, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect should also escape. However, she couldn't bear to see the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect die in the flaming continent. Therefore, she and an elder led these disciples to avoid the general corpses and escaped to this mountain. The general corpses seemed to have some kind of reaction to humans. They would always go to places where humans gathered. Now that the 200,000 disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had gathered, they would naturally attract a large number of general corpses. That night, when the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were resting, they suddenly heard the roar of a general corpse at the foot of the mountain. They quickly prepared for battle. When they looked carefully, they found that there were about thousands of people running up the mountain. Behind them were tens of thousands of new zombies. They roared and chased after them. These people's combat power was very strong. As long as they turned around, they could take down a large number of new zombies. However, these zombies were almost immortal. The zombies that were taken down would quickly get up and continue to chase after them. These people could only run up the mountain. However, the path up the mountain had already been cut off by the sect leader of the Mystic Moon sect. Therefore, at this time, the mountain was surrounded by cliffs. Those people ran to the edge of the cliff and saw that there was no way to go. They all cursed. Damn it! Why is the path cut off? Damn it! Some of them had flying skateboards. However, they were only a few. The others' flying skateboards were basically damaged during the long flight. At this moment, someone saw someone on the opposite mountain. Moreover, these people were all wearing the clothes of the Mystic Moon female sect. He could not help exclaiming aloud, "Senior sisters of the Mystic Moon female sect, we are disciples of the ancient dragon sect, please save us." The sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect snorted when she received the report. The ancient dragon sect treated our Mystic Moon female sect well on the surface, but who knows how many obstacles they have set for us in the dark. They only had themselves to blame for their actions today. Ignore it. As a result, the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect could only watch as the ancient dragon sect disciples were surrounded by the new zombies. Although they had been fighting and struggling for more than 20 minutes, they had all died on the opposite cliff in the end. When the new zombies saw the Mystic Moon female sect disciples, their eyes turned red and they kept roaring at them. There were even new types of zombies trying to jump over the cliff. But in the end, because the distance was too far, they fell into the bottomless abyss after jumping halfway. However, the intelligence of these new zombies wasn't bad. Half an hour later, they thought of a solution. They came to the bottom of the cliff and began to climb up. Although the cliff was almost perpendicular to the ground. But for the hunters, it was not particularly difficult to climb. Similarly, it was not a problem for the new zombies with outstanding jumping ability. On the cliff, the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw this scene and quickly reported it to the sect leader. "Sect leader, what should we do?" The sect leader narrowed her eyes and slowly opened them. She was only putting up a final struggle with these 200,000 disciples. The virus was very aggressive. Even if she was here, it would only delay them for a few days. She had thought of bringing these disciples to the Ancient Flame sect. She heard that the sect leader of the Ancient Flame sect had come out of seclusion and could kill zombies. But this place was too far away from the Ancient Flame sect. How much danger would they have to go through? If they really went to the Ancient Flame sect, there would only be a few disciples left. But even if it was futile, she could not bear to not save them. But now, they were at the end of their rope. Many of the flying skateboards were damaged. One had to know that these disciples had lost their flying devices and could not fly at all. She originally thought that by leaving the crowd and bringing these disciples to this mountain, they would be able to last for a while. But she did not expect the ancient dragon sect to attract zombies again. What should she do next? She sat there cross-legged and seemed to be calm. But she was already a little anxious, because she could not think of any solution at the moment. She could kill her way out, but there were too many disciples. It was impossible for all of them to escape, especially the zombies at the foot of the mountain. There were many of them, and the zombies could not be killed at all. So it seemed that she could not bring these disciples to break out of the encirclement. The surrounding disciples looked at the sect leader at this moment. They were all waiting for the sect leader to answer. But the elder next to her knew that tonight was going to be a difficult night. At this moment, another disciple came to report. "Sect leader, these new zombies are already halfway up." The sect master sighed slightly. Only then did he manage to pull himself together and said, "Prepare for battle. We will kill our way out." "Yes." The disciples yelled at the top of their lungs. They seemed to be full of vigor, but only they knew that tonight was really going to be over. Along the way, the sect leader had helped them solve too many difficulties. But tonight, even the sect leader would not be able to bring them out of danger. At this moment, a few disciples looked at each other. Suddenly, they knelt in front of the sect leader. "Sect leader, please forgive me for offending you. We will not accept the battle." Hearing that, the sect leader looked at that disciple. "Why not?" Those disciples looked at each other. One of them said, "Sect leader, we can't escape tonight. But you and the third elder have the ability and strength to leave. Please leave with the third elder first." When the other female disciples heard that, they came to their senses and knelt down together. "Sect leader, please leave with the third elder. Sect leader, please leave with the third elder." Hearing that, the sect leader slowly stood up. She said, "As the sect leader, if the Mystic Moon sect wants to be destroyed, I should die first." When the female disciples heard that, they all choked with sobs. At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky not far away from them without any warning. Chapter 501. Just as the Mystic Moon female sect disciples were in a desperate situation. In the dark night sky, a figure suddenly appeared without any warning. Although it was nighttime, these Mystic Moon female sect disciples were not ordinary people. They were completely capable of seeing in the dark, but the things they saw were slightly darker than usual. When they saw Immortal, they were stunned. This was because they felt that this face was slightly familiar. Have they seen him before? They seemed to have. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen it. Soon, a disciple remembered. He is Island Master Mo. Island Master Mo. It really is Island Master Mo. What is he doing here? They did not think that Island Master Mo was here to save them. Firstly, Island Master Mo was not related to them and had no obligation to ask them for help. Secondly, from past reviews, even though Island Master Mo wasn't an extremely evil person, he definitely wasn't a good person either. Naturally, he would not take such a huge risk to save them in the middle of the night. When the Mystic Moon female sect leader saw Immortal, it was as though she saw the last trace of hope. She hurriedly stood up and clasped her fists towards Immortal and said, "Island Master Mo, the Mystic Moon female sect has met with a great calamity. Please save us. If Island Master Mo needs us in the future, the Mystic Moon female sect will not refuse." Immortal did not say anything and only nodded. He had a good impression of this Mystic Moon female sect leader. Moreover, he originally came here to collect evolution points and slaughter points. With so many general corpses here, it was the best opportunity to collect evolution points and slaughter points. At this moment, his body slowly descended towards the bottom of the cliff. On the cliff, the general corpses that were climbing up saw this human in front of them and all let out excited roars. They continuously jumped towards Immortal and tried to push Immortal down. However, with a single thought from Immortal, these general corpses were unable to get close to him and all fell from the sky. On the cliff, when the Mystic Moon female sect disciples saw the zombies pouncing towards Immortal, their hearts tightened. Even though they knew that with Island Master Mo's strength, it would be very difficult for these new zombies to harm him. However, seeing that Immortal didn't use any energy to separate the zombies, they were naturally nervous. However, when they saw that none of the zombies were able to get close to Immortal, they came to a realization. Psychic Master. He must be a Psyche Master. No wonder Island Master Mo is so powerful. He is actually a Psyche Master. However, their sect master quickly noticed that something was amiss. She slowly shook her head, and her tone was somewhat surprised. No, he's not a psychic master, but a spiritual psychic master. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect were stunned when they heard this. Immediately, he exclaimed in surprise, "Spiritual psychic." They had seen spiritual psyche masters before. Mystic Moon female sect once had 5 spiritual psyche masters. In order to reach the level of a spiritual reader, one would need to spend a lot of energy and time, far more than an ordinary spiritual master or desolate hunter. Therefore, as long as one was a spiritual reader, it was impossible for them to cultivate anything else. However, according to what they knew, this Island Master Mo was originally an extremely powerful Grand Desolate Master. Summoner again. Now, he was also a spiritual reader. Is there anything you don't know? However, some disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect started to worry. But why is he going down? There are thousands of new types of zombies below. Is he confident if he goes down? The mystic moon female sect master, Xianxia, shook her head slightly. How can the likes of you guess the thoughts of a character like Island Master Mo? Those disciples quickly lowered their heads and kept quiet, not daring to say another word. At this moment, Immortal was slowly descending from the sky. When he was 100 meters away from the ground, the general zombies on the ground had already stretched their necks hungrily. They were even drooling from the corners of their mouths. When he descended a little further, these general zombies suddenly jumped into the air like a group of fleas that were suddenly hung out to dry. However, once they got close to Immortal only needed to move his dragon psyche slightly. These general zombies fell down one after another. Soon, Immortal landed in the air, only 50 meters above the ground. At this moment, more general zombies pounced on Immortal. Looking down from the sky, one could see that the ground was filled with black general zombies. No matter who it was, if they were in such a situation, they would only feel despair. Above the cliff, Xianxia stared at Immortal. She was not worried for Immortal, but wanted to see how the continent's strongest person was like. At this moment, a saber appeared in Immortal's right hand. This saber looked very ordinary. It had a black body and the handle was wrapped with a black coarse cloth. It looked like a large butcher's knife. Then, a fiery red energy poured into the butcher's knife from Immortal's right arm. After a short while, more than half of the energy in his body had been poured into the dragon-slaying saber. The originally ordinary dragon Salyer, at this moment, was actually shining brightly. In the next moment, Immortal swept the dragon-slaying saber with his right hand. Then, with a thought, he kept the dragon-slaying saber in his system backpack. Above the cliff, the mystic moon female sect disciples were all puzzled when they saw this scene. What is Island Master doing? Why did Island Master Mo put the saber away? It's very strange. Xianxia was also slightly surprised when she saw this scene. What she saw was exactly the same as what the female disciples saw. She had no idea what Immortal was doing. The only difference between her and the other female disciples was that she could faintly feel that Immortal's saber strike wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. Just as the female disciples were puzzled. In the next moment, the black mass of general corpses below the cliff suddenly disappeared without a sign. It was so clean that not a single gap was left. Everyone was extremely surprised. Why did they suddenly disappear? Could it be that Island Master Mo's attack just now? Thinking of this, all the female disciples were inexplicably surprised. In their eyes, Island Master Mo had just casually swung the saber. After that, he put the saber away. He did not even use any energy. The thousands of new zombies disappeared just like that? Just as they were surprised, the ground suddenly trembled. "Oh no, an earthquake!" Someone cried out. But at this moment, the sect leader of the Mystic Moon female sect shook her head and said, "No, it's Island Master Mo." Before she finished speaking, the shaking under her feet became even more intense. In the next moment, rumble, the entire mountain began to collapse. The sky collapsed and the earth caved in. The entire mountain with a radius of hundreds of kilometers collapsed with a loud bang. It was like the end of the world. At this moment, all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect had the same thought that shocked them to the extreme. It was Island Master Mo who had cut off this mountain with a single slash. Chapter 502. The mountain was more than 100 kilometers long from east to west and 30 kilometers wide from north to south. But it was cut in half by Wang Lin. What kind of terrifying destructive power was that? Most importantly, they did not see the energy of that slash. His movements were like that of an ordinary person, casually swinging a knife. And it caused such terrifying destruction. What kind of strength was that? Although many of the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect had lost their flying skateboards, they could not fly in the air. But they could still slowly float down from the sky. In the smoke and dust from the collapse of the mountain, they slowly floated down to the ground. After a full 15 minutes, only the smoke and dust could be seen. The disciples of the Mystic Moon sect slowly landed among the large and small stones on the ground. Xianxia immediately floated down to Immortal and clasped her fists to Immortal. She said, "Thank you for saving us, Mr. Imo. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have survived today." Immortal used his dragon will to investigate. There were many disciples of the Mystic Moon sect within the range of his dragon will. He shook his head slightly and said, "You won't be able to go far with them." Xianxia smiled bitterly and said, "I know, but I really can't bear to leave them behind." Immortal pondered for a while and said, "Although my hunting island #1 is not absolutely safe, it should not be an issue at all to fend off those general corpses." Xianxia was overjoyed when she heard this. She hurriedly bowed to Immortal. "Island Master Imo, I thank you for your kindness on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of disciples behind me." Immortal shook his head slightly and said, "No need to say more. Saving a life is better than building a 7-story pagoda. I'll give you half an hour to rest. After half an hour, follow me to the first hunting island." In fact, Immortal had his own considerations when he was willing to take in the disciples of the Mystic Moon sect. There were only about 50,000 people on the first hunting island. Compared to the huge flaming land, it was still a small force. He could not always guard the first hunting island. Moreover, if the corpse virus wasn't dealt with properly, the entire flaming origin continent might be infected. At that time, the first hunting island would have to face the trillions of general corpses of the flaming dawn continent. Then how could he endure it? The hundreds of thousands of disciples from the Mystic Moon female sect would make up for the lack of manpower on hunting island #1. 90% of the people who had followed Immortal to the flaming dawn continent were men. Women had become a rare species on hunting island 1. They were willing to trust Immortal and follow Immortal to hunting island 1. Now that there was an opportunity for them to find wives, Immortal naturally wouldn't let it go. Thus, in the next few days, Immortal led the hundreds of thousands of female disciples and began to migrate. 5 days later, they returned to hunting island 1. The disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw that hunting island #1 was surrounded by blood-red infected creatures. However, the center was full of vitality. They were all very surprised. The people on hunting island #1 were overjoyed at the arrival of the Mystic Moon female sect disciples. "It's too beautiful. Look at that one, I like that one. They're like fairies descending from the heavens." "Are you kidding? They're the Mystic Moon female sect, the third largest sect on the Flaming Dawn continent. Mr. Imo is really amazing. He even brought all the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect to hunting island 1. Let's not talk about other things. In short, we bachelors have a way to survive now. Thank you, Mr. M. Due to the sudden arrival of hundreds of thousands of people, hunting island 1 was not big enough. Immortal asked Guojutao to start expanding the living area on hunting island 1. The female disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect also came to help. Although they were all women, they were not inferior to men when it came to work. This was probably because the Mystic Moon female sect was made up of only female disciples. All the work had to be done by these women, which was why they were able to train so well. Just as the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect were settled in, Immortal received a system notification in his mind. The number of people in the Dragon Palace has exceeded 100,000. It can be upgraded by 1 level. Do you want to upgrade now? Immortal was quite surprised. He had been hesitating whether to use the evolution points in his hand to upgrade the Dragon Palace. However, he had to use his current evolution points to sign in the demon suppressing orb. This was the only way he could think of to break the siege of the General Corpse. Therefore, he did not upgrade the Dragon Palace. He did not expect that the Dragon Palace could be upgraded after bringing back so many disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect. What was there to hesitate about? Upgrade. Immortal said. The system's voice immediately sounded. This upgrade does not require evolution points, but it will take 72 hours. Therefore, Immortal did not leave hunting island 1 for the next 72 hours. In this world, it was possible to encounter infected general corpses everywhere. Therefore, it was better to be careful. 3 days later, just as Immortal had lunch, the system notification sounded in his mind. Dragon Palace successfully upgraded. Emosure quickly checked the Dragon Palace's attributes. Name, Dragon Palace. Level, 5. Members, 231,103. Defense level, able to resist attacks below level 10 Desolate Master, including level 10 Desolate Master. Refining platforms, 10. Other attributes, click to expand. Emosure clicked to expand the other attributes and found that there were not many changes to them. Only the addition of 1,000 virtual sentry towers. Emosure could place these 1,000 virtual sentry towers within a 10,000-kilometer radius around the Dragon Palace. This way, Emosure would be able to see any changes within a 10,000-kilometer radius. The biggest change was the defense level and refining platforms that were displayed on the surface. The defense level was maxed out. In other words, even the strongest existence in the Flaming Origin continent would not be able to break through the defense of Hunting Island 1. Even the current Emosure would not be able to break through it. The defense level was not weak at all. Another change was that the number of refining platforms had increased to 10. 10 desolate refining platforms meant that 10 desolate masters could be refined. In 3 months, he would be able to produce 100 grand desolate masters. It was exciting just thinking about it. When the disciples of the Mystic Moon female sect saw how easy it was to create desolate masters on Hunting Island 1, they felt that their worldview was shattered. From what they knew, every grand desolate master had lived for hundreds of years. First, they had to have absolute talent. Then, they had to train hard and take risks to gain experience in various places. They also needed the support of absolute luck before they could become a grand desolate master. However, this number 1 Hunting Island had produced 10 grand desolate masters in 10 days. This was too much of a bug. Xianxia originally thought that she would take these female disciples to other planets when she had the chance in the future. But when she saw this bug-like refining platform, she finally gave up on this idea. Chapter 503. Xianxia thought, let these female disciples stay here. Perhaps in the near future, many of them would have a chance to become grand desolate masters. As their sect leader, she was happy for them. Therefore, she did not plan to leave immediately. Instead, she contacted the elders in the sect and asked them to bring the desolate hunters to other planets to develop. If there was a chance in the future, she would ask the elders to bring the disciples back. Thinking of the desolate hunter disciples, before they left, they were the elites of the sect. But by the time they returned, many of the desolate hunter disciples in the sect might have become grand desolate masters. I don't know how they should feel. In the following days, Emosure went out every day to kill the general corpses. His evolution points and kill points were also increasing rapidly. Finally, one day, in his mind, the system's familiar voice sounded frowny face kill points have reached 10 billion. Can be upgraded. Emosure said in his mind without hesitation, upgrade. This upgrade will take 48 hours. Emosure immediately returned to the first hunting island. He stayed on the first hunting island for 2 days. The system's voice sounded again frowny face upgrade successful. At the same time, Emosure's attributes appeared in his mind frowny face name, Emosure, level 10 desolate hunter, level 10 long Xianxia. Emosure saw it and could not help but feel excited. One more level and he would become a grand desolate master. There were so many general corpses on the continent. If he kept killing them, he would be able to get enough kill points. According to his previous experience, another upgrade would require 100 billion kill points. Killing 10 general corpses would give him 1 kill point. Then he would have to kill 1 trillion general corpses. There were only 3 trillion humans in the entire Flaming Land. If he really wanted to get so many kill points, it would mean that at least 1/3 of the Flaming Land's population had become general corpses. Emosure shook his head. This would not do. He asked in his mind, system, is there no other way to upgrade? If it was in the past, the system would basically remain silent when faced with such a problem. Because the system would usually give the best solution. No other choice would be better than the system's solution. But this time, Emosure had not expected it. When he asked this question, the system replied instantly, frowny face, there are still 3 options. Immortal was slightly taken aback. Then he hurriedly said, tell me quickly. The system's voice sounded, frowny face 1. Use all of your current evolution points to upgrade Dragon Palace by 1 level. He could increase the number of refining stations to 100. Each desolate refining platform required 10 days to refine a Grand Desolate Master. As long as the host spends 10 days to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters, the host will automatically level up. From there, you will be promoted to a Grand Desolate Master. Immortal's eyes lit up. That was a good idea. However, he quickly rejected this plan. All of his current evolution points still need to be used to sign in the Demon Suppressing Orb. Currently, the Demon Suppressing Orb was the only thing that could be used by others to deal with corpse generals. What about the second one? Immortal asked. The system's voice sounded again, frowny face 2. With the current speed of the Desolate Refining Platform, it will be able to refine 100 Grand Desolate Masters in 3 months. At that time, the host will automatically level up. Immortal nodded his head. Yes, this is okay. In other words, even if Immortal didn't do anything in these 3 months, after 3 months he would also level up. At that time, he would directly become a Grand Desolate Master. Other Grand Desolate Masters had to go through untold hardships and hundreds of years to reach the Grand Desolate Master realm. Even if he didn't do anything and just ate, drank, played, and slept, he would still reach the Grand Desolate Master realm in 3 months. If other Grand Desolate Masters knew about this, they would vomit blood. Of course, compared to the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform, Immortal's speed was a lot slower. However, the Grand Desolate Masters refined by the Desolate Refining Platform only had the fighting strength of normal Grand Desolate Masters. Although Immortal was only a level 10 Desolate Master, his fighting strength was extremely powerful. He could already challenge level 5 to 6 Grand Desolate Masters. This didn't include the Sea Dragon clones bonus. Thus, he didn't envy them. What about the third one? Immortal asked. The system replied, frowny face 3. Kill a living giant dragon and devour its blood. You can advance to the Grand Desolate Master realm, which is the Giant Dragon realm. When Immortal heard this, he was a little speechless. Are there other giant dragons in this world? The system replied, frowny face, the universe is big, there are all kinds of strange things. Immortal's eyes lit up and he asked, so, there are really places in the universe where giant dragons live? This time, the system didn't reply instantly. It directly fell into silence. However, Immortal had already tasted something from the system's words. The system definitely wasn't randomly giving out such a mission. In that case, it shouldn't take too long for him to see a real giant dragon. The second giant dragon other than himself. Of course, it could also be many giant dragons. And from the looks of it, the system seemed to be deliberately pushing him to the opposite side of the giant dragons. The rope given was called the Dragon Binding Rope, and the saber given was called the Dragon Slaying Saber. Even the evolution had evolved into a bloodthirsty demon dragon. If the other giant dragons knew about it, they might try every means to hunt him down. Thinking of this, Immortal seemed to have seen what kind of battle he would face in the near future. Thinking of this, he felt that he had to increase his strength as soon as possible. Just reaching the peak of the flaming beginning continent was far from enough. He had to increase his combat strength to a higher level before he met those giant dragons. Therefore, in the next few days, Immortal didn't wait quietly for more than 3 months to pass. Instead, he kept going outside and slaughtering those general corpses. And now, his methods were even more ruthless and he slaughtered faster. His evolution points were also constantly rising. Gradually, time passed. In more than 3 months, Immortal's kill points had reached more than 1 billion. Obviously, he was still far from reaching 100 billion. However, in these 3 months, he had signed in more than 200 demon-suppressing orbs. With so many demon-suppressing orbs, he felt a little more relaxed. At the same time, on this day, the 100th Grand Desolate Master was refined on the Desolate Refining Platform. In Emoshir's mind, a system notification suddenly sounded frowny face. After refining 100 grand desolate masters, the host will automatically level up by 1 level. In the next moment, Emoshir felt a huge amount of energy suddenly surging through his meridians without any warning. Every cell in his body seemed to have come alive in an instant. Every muscle in his body felt like it was about to be torn apart. Every vein in his body seemed to be about to burst. However, this feeling only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Then, his entire body suddenly felt relaxed. Chapter 504. Compared to other level 10 desolate hunters who needed decades to become a grand desolate master, Wang Yi's process was much simpler. The process of his cells coming to life, his muscles tearing, and his meridians bursting only lasted for less than 5 minutes. Soon he felt his body relax. It was as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. In his mind, the system's voice also sounded, "Promotion successful." Emoshir checked his status. Name, Emoshir level 1 Grand Desolate Master, rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon, level 10 Long Xianxia ability, click to expand. Phew, Emoshir let out a long breath. He had finally become a Grand Desolate Master. At the same time, according to the Giant Dragon's power system, he had reached rank 1 Evolved Giant Dragon. The dragon race's ranks were Giant Dragon, Evolved Giant Dragon, Super Evolved Giant Dragon, Ancient Giant Dragon, Immemorial Giant Dragon, and so on. Emoshir's current level of Evolved Giant Dragon could only be considered as a newbie. Emoshir was already an invincible existence in the Flaming Land. This promotion had raised his strength to another level. Of course, this was still not enough. Since the system wanted to train him to become a dragon slayer, he had to continue to increase his strength. Now that he had become a Grand Desolate Master, he needed 1 trillion kill points for every level up. Even if all the people in the Flaming Land turned into general corpses and he killed them all, it would not be enough for him to level up. Thus, there were only 2 methods left. One was to use all his evolution points to level up the Dragon Palace and double the number of refining tables. However, this was not a consideration for now. The last method was to slay a dragon. According to the system, as long as he killed a giant dragon, he could level up to a Grand Desolate Master. Now that he was a Grand Desolate Master, he would need to kill at least 10 giant dragons. In the Flaming Land, there was not a single giant dragon other than himself. Where would he find 10 giant dragons? The system's voice quickly sounded, "You only need to kill 1 giant dragon to level up." Emoshir was surprised. "Oh? But..." The system replied, "The host has not killed a real giant dragon, so killing a giant dragon will level up. Consider it a reward for the host." Emoshir nodded. "Yes, that's a good idea. But where can I find a dragon?" The system fell into silence once again. Emoshir shook his head. Once the system remained silent, there was nothing he could do. It seemed that he could only fumble around on his own. For the next 2 months, Hunting Island 1 was peaceful. Every 10 days, the number 1 Hunting Island would produce 10 Grand Desolate Masters. Outside of Hunting Island number 1, the entire continent was not peaceful. The Corpse General had already taken over more and more areas. Almost half of the humans on the Flaming Continent had been infected. In the early stages of the zombie infection, many people had the mentality that the fewer people there were, the safer it would be. Just like a zombie infection, once a zombie got into a densely populated city, the whole city would be in an uproar. If a zombie was thrown into a village with only 20 to 30 families, it was very likely that only the village would be infected. Little did they know that this was equivalent to being surrounded by the commander corpses and then being defeated one by one. By now, people had also realized this. They started huddling together for warmth. At the same time, some cultivators with special attributes such as fire and ice did not die after being infected. Instead, their abilities were greatly improved. After their strength increased, their abilities became the bane of the Corpse General virus. In theory, the Corpse General virus could not be killed. However, Cultivators with ice attribute could use their ice attribute energy to freeze the virus. The frozen virus would not be able to break free in a short period of time. As for cultivators with fire attribute, as long as they could raise the temperature of their fire attribute energy to a certain degree, they could directly vaporize the virus. There were also cultivators with lightning attribute energy. Their lightning attribute energy was extremely explosive and destructive. They could vaporize the corpse general virus with just one blow. There were also cultivators with poison attribute energy. After their energy was strengthened, not only would they be immune to the corpse general virus, the poison attribute energy in their bodies would also have a strong suppressive effect on the corpse general virus. Therefore, when almost all the desolate hunters had fled, there were some heroes who specialized in hunting down the corpse general virus. Of course, such heroes were very few in number. Therefore, they had a very high status in the hearts of the people. In many cities, the people used these heroes as their leaders to set up defensive lines to defend against the corpse general virus. As a result, many bases of various sizes gradually formed on the flaming continent. When Immortal saw these bases, he could not help but shake his head. It turned out that when he came to the flaming continent from Earth, he had jumped from a small fire pit into an even bigger one. Immortal had used his draconic will to briefly scan a few bases. The bodies of the leaders of these bases had been strengthened by the corpse general virus. Their strength had reached the level of a grand desolate master. However, this was clearly far from enough. There were more and more corpse general virus outside the bases, and the resources in their bases were decreasing. If they wanted to survive, they had to go out frequently to search for resources. This was unavoidable. After more than 2 months, there were more than 1,500 bases on the flaming continent. With so many bases, there were naturally more than 1,500 grand desolate masters with special abilities. It was also at this time that the corpse general virus began to gather and launch a large-scale attack on the human bases. At first, the people were not prepared, and the corpse general virus easily broke through more than 100 bases. After that, the people began to strengthen their defenses and defend these bases. However, this was only the beginning, because the corpse general virus would only increase, and with these 1,400 experts, the corpse general virus could not kill as fast as the corpse general virus could infect them. Among so many experts, apart from Immortal, the strongest was the sect master of the ancient flame sect, Lori. Immortal had been killing corpse general virus far away from the bases, so no one knew how strong he was. As a result, Lori seemed to have become the strongest person on the continent. With the ancient flame sect as the base, the radius of the base was more than 100 kilometers. Within this range, the corpse general virus did not dare to show its head. If it did, it would be destroyed by Lori. Lori was in the limelight on the entire flaming continent. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall on East End Island. Below the Sea Heart Waterfall, there was a huge pool with a radius of 50 kilometers. The seawater from the surrounding waterfalls all gathered in this huge pool. No one knew where the seawater from the surrounding waterfalls went after gathering in this pool. The pool was dark and deep, like a huge black eye gazing at the sky from the bottom of the sea. On this day, at a certain moment, 5 meters above the pool, the air suddenly distorted. Chapter 505. Sea Heart Waterfall, 5 meters above the deep pool. The space suddenly distorted. Then, a huge figure suddenly appeared. This huge figure was about 1,000 meters long. It had a pair of wings on its back. Its long tail was also more than 3 meters long. Its body was covered in black scales. There were ferocious spikes on its head. It was a giant dragon. This giant dragon's wings flapped slightly. Its figure instantly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already 5,000 meters above the Sea Heart Waterfall. It lowered its head and looked down at the entire sea. Its pitch-black dragon eyes kept turning. Just a few seconds later, its wings flapped again. In the next moment, its figure had already disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already more than 1,000 kilometers away. Its wings flapped again. It reappeared more than 1,000 kilometers to the east. Just like that, it flapped its wings a few times and soon explored the area within 1,000 kilometers of the Sea Heart waterfall. Finally, its figure stopped in the sky above East Pole Island. At the same time, a voice sounded in this giant dragon's right ear. "Kongjiu, have we arrived?" The dragon called Empty Nine chuckled and spoke in a human voice. "That's right. We're here." The voice sounded in its right ear again. "Let's see how the creatures there are. We've been away for tens of thousands of years. They must have grown and are not as weak as before." The giant dragon called Kongjiu smiled and said, "Then I'll test them." The voice in its right ear said, "Just test them. Don't kill them randomly. Every living thing here had a number. If you kill too many, it'll be troublesome if the higher-ups find out." Kongjiu chuckled and said, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing." East Pole Island had already built a base called East Pole Base. The East Pole Island Lord did not escape from the flame-beginning continent with the others. Instead, he had been protecting the people on the island. No one would have thought that the East Pole Island Lord, who had always been extremely strict, would live and die with the islanders in this moment of life and death. However, he was unfortunately infected with the corpse general virus in a battle with a general corpse. However, not only did the corpse general virus not turn him into a general corpse, but it also greatly strengthened his body. As a result, his strength had soared to level 8 Grand Desolate Master. Moreover, his body had also evolved to a certain extent. The fire attribute energy in his body could vaporize the corpse virus in a short period of time. Since then, he had led the islanders to build the East Pole Base here. At this moment, the people in the East Pole Base were busy building the base. When someone inadvertently raised his head to look at the sky, he saw a huge figure slowly flapping its wings and floating in the sky. And this huge figure was exactly the same as the giant dragon recorded in legends, ancient murals, and ancient books. The man's eyes widened in shock. His mouth opened slightly. The person next to him noticed this person's strange behavior and followed his gaze. With one look, his eyes widened and his mouth opened slightly. After a while, his Adam's apple moved with difficulty. His lips moved. He wanted to make a sound. However, he realized that his throat was a little dry. His Adam's apple squirmed again with difficulty before he spoke. "I'm sorry, Giant Dragon." When the others heard his voice, they all looked up at the sky. With one look, everyone was incomparably shocked. "Giant Dragon? It's really a giant dragon. This is a real giant dragon. Is it an illusion? It's impossible. Everyone is hallucinating. This is a real giant dragon." Amidst the shocked cries, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground. In the culture of the Flaming Land, almost every race had a giant dragon as their totem. Giant dragons were the most powerful and mysterious creatures in the universe. Tens of thousands of years ago, there were many giant dragons on this continent. However, for some reason all the giant dragons disappeared. Some said that a disaster fell from the sky and caused the giant dragons to go extinct. Some said that the giant dragons could not adapt to the changes in the environment. Some said that the giant dragons went to other planets. Regardless of which theory it was, not a single giant dragon had appeared in the Flaming Land for tens of thousands of years. And now, a living giant dragon had appeared in front of them. How could they not be shocked? How could they not prostrate themselves in worship? The East Pole Island Lord heard the commotion and also came to the courtyard. When he saw the huge figure that was more than 1,000 meters long in the sky, his entire body seemed to tremble. Giant dragon! This was a real giant dragon. Even someone as powerful as him had the urge to kneel down and worship it. At this moment, the giant dragon that was slowly flapping its wings in the sky suddenly retracted its wings. It dove toward the ground. In almost 3 seconds, it dove to the ground from a height of more than 10,000 meters. A pair of front claws clawed toward the ground. Rumble! Its pair of huge claws drew a huge ravine that was more than 1,000 meters long and 100 meters wide on the ground. The hundreds of humans in the ravine were instantly turned into hundreds of corpses under its sharp claws. They were thrown far away. Then, its giant tail, which was hundreds of meters long, swept across the area. Rumble. One after another, the buildings collapsed to the ground. Gotcha. One by one, the trees were snapped. The humans screamed in agony. But this time, hundreds of humans were directly sent to the Yellow Springs. The 200,000 humans who were prostrating on the ground were all dumbfounded. They had always been in awe of giant dragons. After this giant dragon appeared, they immediately prostrated themselves in worship. Why was the giant dragon doing this to them? In their panic, they fled in all directions. However, the speed at which they fled was far slower than the speed at which the giant dragon slaughtered them. Every time the giant dragon's tail swept across, at least 100 people would be smashed into meat paste. This scene was even more terrifying than any monster movie. When the East Pole Island Master saw this, he was also terrified at first. Like these humans, he did not know why the giant dragon would suddenly attack these humans. But soon, the fear in his heart was replaced by anger. These humans under his command worshipped the giant dragon so much. Even in their hearts, they did not dare to disobey the giant dragon in the slightest. Some even offered incense to the giant dragon and prayed to it every day. They never imagined that the giant dragon that appeared out of nowhere would treat them like this. In his anger, a fiery red spear condensed in his right hand. This fiery red spear seemed to be condensed from magma. Holding the spear in his right hand, he roared, "Evil dragon, die!" As he spoke, he threw the spear in his right hand at the giant dragon. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.